You say, "It's just my fate," when the same sorrow visits you again, the relationship that ends in the same bitter way, the job that suffocates you in a strangely familiar pattern, the inner emptiness that no achievement can finally fill. You speak of destiny, of bad luck, of how things always go for me, as if life were a script written somewhere outside of you. Yet what you call fate is very often your own inner life, disowned, unrecognized, and returning in another form. Imagine a dream. You are walking down a narrow road at dusk. The sky is turning violet, and ahead of you stands a crossroads. At one path, a figure cloaked in black silently points left. On the other path, a small, flickering light invites you to the right. You hesitate. You feel pulled toward the darkness, yet you insist to yourself, "I had no choice. It just happened." When you wake, you dismiss the dream. But the same pattern appears in your life. At every critical decision, you feel strangely compelled to choose what will hurt you and then call it fate. This is how the unconscious works when you are unaware of it. It chooses for you. Until you recognize that there is an inner companion, or perhaps a whole inner crowd living within you, your life will be steered by forces you do not see. You stand on the ship's deck, imagining you are the captain, but deep below, beneath the waterline of consciousness, an invisible crew has already set the course. And then you say, "It was meant to be," but was it? Or was it simply unlived life, unacknowledged desires, and rejected truths, returning to you from the outside because you refused them within? We must begin here, with the uncomfortable reality that you are not one, but many. You imagine yourself as a single, unified I, who knows what it wants, who makes choices, who plans its future. But this I, what we call the ego, is only a small island in a vast sea. Around this island lies the unconscious, a domain full of forgotten memories, forbidden wishes, wounded parts, and timeless patterns, which I have called archetypes. There lives your shadow, all that you do not wish to be, but still are. There lives your unloved anger, your rejected weakness, your denied hunger for power or tenderness. There lives the child you abandoned when you decided to become reasonable, productive, and mature. All this does not vanish when you reject it. It becomes autonomous. It begins to act. When you say, "I would never do such a thing," know that there is another voice in you that might. And if you refuse to hear it, that voice will not simply disappear. It will move outward, into the world, and wear the faces of other people, accidents, and seemingly external misfortunes. This is what I mean when I say, what you call fate is often your disowned inner life. You meet your own rejected qualities as if they were events imposed on you from outside. You fall into situations. You are drawn to certain people. You happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you overlook the quiet fact that some inner pattern in you was moving toward exactly this. Think of a woman who repeatedly finds herself with partners who humiliate her, belittle her, or abandon her. Each time she says, "Why does this always happen to me? I just meet the wrong kind of person. It must be fate." She blames her misfortune, the cruelty of others, the unfairness of life. But if we look more closely, we may see that she is drawn, almost magnetically, to those who reflect an inner conviction she carries about herself. I am not worthy of respect. I must endure mistreatment to be loved. This conviction might be unconscious. Perhaps it was formed in childhood when love came mixed with humiliation. Perhaps it was reinforced by culture, by family, by religion. Whatever its origin, it has sunk below awareness, but it has not lost its power. It functions as an inner law, and so, guided by this hidden law, she chooses precisely those situations that will confirm it. Something in her says, "This is familiar. This is home." Not consciously, of course. Consciously, she wants love, stability, kindness. But unconsciously, She seeks what mirrors her own secret belief about what love is and what she deserves. From this perspective, her fate is not a random cruelty imposed by the universe. It is a repetition compulsion, born of her disowned inner story. You may notice something similar in yourself. Perhaps you find that every time you succeed, you mysteriously sabotage yourself. You miss deadlines. You choose the one option that will fail. You say something reckless precisely when you need composure. Then you sigh. Everything just falls apart for me. That's my fate. Look closely. Is it fate, or is it an unconscious loyalty to a story? If I stand out, I will be attacked, or I must stay small to be safe, or success will cost me love. As long as this story remains unconscious, as long as it is not brought into the light and questioned, it will behave like destiny. We suffer most not from what life brings, but from what we ourselves are doing without knowing it. There is a simple sentence that you may know. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is not poetry. It is a description of psychological reality. Think of your life as a great drama unfolding on a stage. Your ego imagines itself to be the playwright and the lead actor at once. But behind the curtains, beyond your awareness, there are other figures writing lines into your script. These figures are complexes, living knots of emotion, memory, and meaning that once formed around experiences too painful, too strange, or too incompatible with your conscious self-image. Perhaps there is a complex of abandonment. It hears every delay as rejection, every silence as contempt. Perhaps there is a complex of power. It fears weakness so intensely that it must dominate or flee. Perhaps there is a complex of guilt. It cannot tolerate joy without secretly engineering punishment. Each complex possesses a piece of your energy, a fragment of your soul, and each, at the right moment, steps onto the stage and takes control. Suddenly, you say things you did not mean to say, do things you did not intend to do, and afterward you exclaim, "I don't know what got into me." Something did get into you, or rather, something emerged from within you. A complex seized you for a while. When such moments accumulate, they weave the texture of what you call your life story. If you never recognize the invisible authors, you will see only a mysterious, repeating pattern, and name it fate. The tendency to escape responsibility by appealing to fate is deeply human. To say, "It just happened," is easier than to ask, "What in me was seeking this? What inner figure wanted this outcome?" Such questions are painful because they confront you with your own share in the tragedy of your life. Yet this confrontation is the doorway to freedom. I do not say this to blame you. The unconscious is not your fault. You did not choose your parents, your early wounds, the collective beliefs that shaped you. You did not consciously decide which parts of yourself would be exiled into the shadow. But now, as an adult, you stand at a threshold. Either you will continue to live as the instrument of unconscious patterns, or you will begin to know them, and thus to shape your participation in what you once called fate. To see your own shadow is to discover that the enemy you have been fighting outside has long lived within. The critic, the tyrant, the seducer, the coward, the victim, you project these onto others because you cannot yet bear to recognize them at home. So your life fills with problem people. Always there is someone who embodies everything you despise, everything that ruins your plans. You say, "If only they would change, my life would finally be free." But these people are drawn to you, or you to them, because they represent an aspect of your own psyche that you deny. In this way, the outer world becomes a mirror for the inner world, and you call the reflection fate. Let us speak of projection, for it is one of the primary ways in which disowned inner life masquerades as destiny. Projection is the process by which you unconsciously attribute to another person some quality, impulse, or emotion that actually belongs to you. You do this because that quality is incompatible with your conscious self-image, or because it is too charged with emotion to be held calmly in awareness. Imagine an individual who prides themselves on being rational, controlled, above primitive emotions. Such a person is likely to banish their passionate, irrational, instinctual side into the shadow. But the psyche does not tolerate such one-sidedness. The exiled qualities seek expression. So this rational person may find themselves irresistibly drawn to someone wild, emotional, unpredictable, or deeply irritated by such a person. They say, "I don't know why I keep ending up with partners who are chaotic messes, or why is my life full of people who are so irrational?" Fate, it seems, sends them these companions. But it is their own unlived passion that stands before them, wearing another face. Or consider someone who believes themselves morally superior, kind, understanding, fair. Their aggression, envy, and need for power will likely be pushed into the shadow. Then life will present them with a whole cast of selfish monsters, users, and narcissists. They will feel perpetually victimized, cursed to meet only the worst in others. They will not see that their disowned capacity for cruelty and self-interest is playing across the screen of their relationships. Here again, what appears as a fated repetition is a projection drama. To break such a curse, one must withdraw the projection that is, recognize, this too is me. Not that the other person has no responsibility for their actions, but that your intense reaction, your uncanny pattern, reveals something about your inner landscape. So long as you refuse this recognition, you are bound. You remain convinced that destiny, or God, or a malicious universe is arranging your life against you. In truth, a neglected God within you, an archetypal force, is striving to be acknowledged. Now you may ask, if so much of what I call fate is actually my disowned inner life, what then of true fate? Are we saying that everything is my responsibility? No, there are outer events, collective forces, and sheer accidents that lie beyond your capacity to influence. Illness, war, economic collapse, natural disaster. These remind us that we are not omnipotent, not masters of existence. But even in such events, two realms are at work: what happens to you and how you respond to it. The first may be largely beyond your control. The second is deeply intertwined with your psyche, your complexes, your archetypal patterns, your unlived possibilities. Two people may live through similar external circumstances and yet live entirely different inner stories. One experiences only meaningless suffering. The other, though wounded, slowly discovers a deeper meaning in their pain. The outer event may be the same. The inner response is not. I do not claim that meaning cancels suffering. It does not. But where there is meaning, suffering is no longer merely absurd. It becomes part of a process. This process, which I have called individuation, is the slow, often painful realization of the self, the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, human and more than human. Individuation does not mean becoming perfect. It means becoming whole. And here again, we encounter fate. For the self has a kind of intention for you. It pushes you toward wholeness through conflicts, frustrations, and strange coincidences. It allows your ego to pursue its plans up to a point, then intervenes with events that seem to block you. These blocks are not always punishments. They are often invitations. When you ask, "Why does life keep stopping me from going where I want?" another question quietly emerges underneath. Who is it in me that wants this path, and who is it that opposes it? The conflict between these two is not meaningless. It is the very arena in which your soul is trying to grow. Often, What you call bad luck is the psyche's attempt to correct a one-sided life. If you live only in your head, ignoring your body, ignoring your feelings, ignoring your imagination, life may confront you with situations that force you back into your depths. A breakdown, a crisis, a loss of control. You will feel attacked by fate, but in truth, your own nature has turned against your narrowness. If you live only for others, sacrificing your own needs, saying yes when you mean no, you may find yourself betrayed, taken for granted, abandoned. Again, you will cry, "Why does this always happen to me?" But beneath this lament, your soul is perhaps saying, you must learn to value yourself, you must discover your own center, not only circle around others, or if you live only for power, status, achievement, you may reach a great height, only to discover a deep emptiness, or to see it all collapse in a single scandalous act of self-sabotage. You will speak of enemies, conspiracies, cruel fortune, but in the ruins, a quieter voice might whisper, "You have forgotten your human heart. You must begin again, from within." These painful turns in life are not all deliberately chosen by the ego, but neither are they mere blind fate. They reveal the self at work, the inner order that uses both joy and suffering to lead you toward a more complete existence. To cooperate with this process is to move from being a victim of fate to being a partner in your own destiny. How, then, can you begin to recognize when fate is actually your disowned inner life in disguise? First, pay attention to repetition. Ask yourself, where do I keep living the same story? In love, in work, in friendship, in my inner life? What patterns return? Again and again. Repetition is one of the clearest signatures of the unconscious at work. Life tries to teach you something through one experience. If you do not learn it, the lesson returns, often with greater intensity. Second, listen to your dreams. Dreams are the direct communications of the unconscious. They reveal, in symbolic form, what your waking mind refuses to see. A recurring dream of being chased, of failing a test, of missing a train. These show where anxiety, self-doubt, or missed opportunities live in you. You might dream of a neglected child, a wounded animal, a dangerous intruder, a wise old woman, a mysterious stranger. All these are potential figures of your inner life, asking to be seen. When you ignore them, they do not vanish. They move into your outer world, becoming problem people, crises, or accidents. Every dream is a small fragment of your fate, written in the language of symbols. To interpret it is not to predict the future, but to understand the present more deeply and thereby to influence what comes. Third, observe your strongest emotions in relation to others. Where you feel disproportionate hatred, admiration, or fear, there is projection. Where you say, "I can't stand people who are X," or "I always attract people who are Y," there you will likely find your own unlived qualities. These are the places where you say always, never, everyone, no one. The language of fatalism, covering the tracks of the unconscious. To work with these emotions is to ask, gently but honestly, what part of me am I seeing out there? What does this person mirror in my own psyche? Fourth, notice your accidents. Not every mishap is meaningful, but some carry a peculiar, symbolic character. They occur at precisely the wrong or right moment. They echo a theme in your life. They feel charged, uncanny, as if arranged. When such events cluster around a period of inner tension, we may be near what I have called synchronicity, the meeting of inner and outer patterns in a meaningful way. These are moments when fate seems to speak. But if you listen closely, you may discover that it is your own deeper self speaking. To engage these processes is difficult. It requires courage to abandon the comfort of blaming fate and to admit there is something in me that participates in my suffering. You may feel guilt when you first recognize this. Be careful. The purpose of such insight is not to condemn yourself, but to become more conscious. You are not guilty of having an unconscious. You are only responsible for what you do once you begin to see it. So when you notice a repeating pattern, when you meet a shadow figure in dreams, when you observe a projection in your relationships, take it as an invitation. Sit with it, reflect on it, perhaps write about it, or imagine speaking with it in what I have called active imagination, a dialogue between your ego and the figures of your inner world. Ask the repeating pattern, what are you trying to teach me? Ask the shadow, what do you want from me? Ask the dream figure, why have you come now? You may be surprised by the answers that arise from within. They may come as images, as phrases, as sudden insights. The unconscious will not speak in the language of logic, but in symbols. Learn to listen. Slowly, the split between your inner life and your outer fate begins to narrow. You realize that events that once seemed arbitrary now illuminate aspects of yourself. You see how your relationships have been mirrors. You recognize the wisdom hidden in certain losses and failures. This recognition does not erase pain, but it transforms it. You are no longer merely the victim of a senseless fate. You are the protagonist of a meaningful journey. There is a paradox at the heart of all this. The more you take responsibility for your inner life, your complexes, projections, shadow, and dreams, the more you discover something that is not merely you in the personal sense. You encounter an inner center that feels wiser, broader, deeper than your ego. This I call the self. At first, you may experience the self only as a voice of conscience, or as a subtle intuition that quietly opposes your ego's plans. Perhaps you feel it as a tension. Part of you wants to go one way, another part resists. You may experience it in dreams as a guide, an old man, a radiant woman, an inner teacher, or a divine child. You may find that when you betray this inner center, your life fills with emptiness or restlessness. No matter how successful you appear outside, the self is not your slave. It does not obey your ego's desires. It is more like a hidden architect of your lives, meaning constantly working to bring you toward wholeness. Sometimes it does this gently. Sometimes, when you are stubborn, it uses shocks. In this sense, there is something like destiny, not a rigid script dictating every event, but a pattern, a direction, a call. You are called to become who you are, not who you imagine you should be, or who others demand you to be, but who you are in your totality. Everything in you that has been split off, your shadow, your unlived talents, your rejected feelings, your wounded child, your inner masculine or feminine, all this must eventually be recognized, related to, and given a place in your life. If you refuse this call, then indeed you are fated, not by the stars, not by some external power, but by the inner necessity of your own nature. The more you resist, the more your life fills with frustration, misfortune, and meaningless repetition. If you answer this call, your fate becomes something different. It becomes a path. You will still meet difficulty, suffering, loss. No one escapes these, but they will no longer appear as random punishments. They will be woven into a narrative of growth. You may even look back one day and say, if that had not happened, painful as it was, I would not have awakened. So when you next say, this is just my fate, pause, ask yourself, what repeating story is being played out here? What unconscious belief about myself or the world is this situation confirming? Whom am I meeting in this event? A person outside or a hidden figure within? What quality in myself have I disowned that now appears before me in another's behavior? What dream, what symptom, what quiet intuition have I ignored that now speaks in this louder form? Do not rush to answer with your intellect. Let the questions sink in. Allow images, memories, and feelings to arise. Often, the first step is simply to admit, there is more to this than bad luck. Something in me is involved. This admission is an act of humility and of great power. For when you recognize your participation in what you once called fate, you reclaim a part of your soul. The shadow becomes less dark. The compulsions lose some of their grip. You begin to see that your life is not merely happening to you, it is also happening through you. The outer world will always remain partly mysterious, partly beyond your control. But your inner world, once unknown and disowned, can become your ally rather than your saboteur. To live from this place is not to dominate fate, but to enter into a conscious dialogue with it. You listen to your dreams as messages. You treat conflicts as teachers. You meet your enemies as mirrors. You encounter chance events as possible signs from the self. You will still stumble, still fall into patterns at times. The unconscious cannot be emptied, but you will fall with more awareness and rise with deeper insight. In the end, perhaps, you will no longer speak so easily of fate as something hostile and fixed. You will sense, instead, a living interplay between your soul and the world, a conversation, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, through which you are being shaped into who you truly are. And then, when you look back on your life, you may see that what you once cursed as cruel destiny was in part your own disowned inner life, seeking to come home. The stranger who kept knocking on your door in the form of loss, conflict, repetition, and dream was yourself.